Hello everybody, it's Foxy speaking, and welcome to another episode of Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats. And today I will be your host. And in this episode, this is the Fun Inspirational Adventure episode. This is going to be the long one, where it's going to be an adventure worth going on. And I've got this little book so in case I don't lose track of anything. Just to say, and so yes, here we are. Let the adventure story begin. It was April, shortly before the school holidays, and it was a nice sunny morning, but obviously cold. There I was fast asleep in my bed until my alarm went off. What did I woke up with a sudden jolt. No, it happened. No. Yes, I woke up, still quite tired, and I was like, turned it off. And then I looked at my telephone and saw the date. My eyes began to widen slightly, and I was like, oh yes, I've just remembered. I've got to meet up with my good friend Penny D, as she's over in England from Wisconsin in America. And so I immediately got out of bed, got showered up, shaved off my beard and moustache, conditioned up my hair, got dressed in a shirt and cardigan and put on a yellow tie because it was a special meeting I was going to have at the Hove Museum with lovely Penny. And fed the cats, did the kitty litter trays, had my breakfast. A nice porridge breakfast with a teaspoon or two of added sugar. Once the porridge breakfast was over, I put on my blue-coloured coat, zipped it up, and off I went, walking my way to Hove Museum, as I didn't have terribly far to walk. Whilst I was on my way there, I walked into the Covet fashionable boutique shop where I saw my good friend Jay. I said hello to Jay, and we had our funny conversed conversation, as we do like to have a conversed conversation about all sorts of interesting stuff, sometimes some personal things, but definitely interesting things, and as well as talking classic cars and her time when she, at her former 5'8.5" height, now 5'8", which is my height, I'm 5'8" as well, but the only difference is she's not 11 stone like I am. I'm 11 stone or 154 pounds, but Jay, on the other hand, is 112 pounds or 8 stone, as she did tell me, so a petite thing, even though she's my height. And obviously recounting the story sometimes of when she tried to clamber inside and out of the Trans Spitfire, which she said was like sitting in a go-kart. Do we have a laugh whenever we talk about it? Then I said goodbye after I purchased the gift I wanted to give to Penny. And after I purchased my gift from the Covet fashionable boutique shop, then I walked my way to the Hove Museum. And once I got, after a good few minutes of walking, it took me time, but then I entered the museum. There I greeted the people at the reception saying hello, and then I walked my way into the cafe of the Hove Museum. Once I walked into the cafe, there was a greeting awaiting me. It was Penny! There the lovely lady stood up and was like, oh, hello, Foxy. She said, Penny. I said, hello. And we walked up to each other, embracing with a great big hug as we said hello. Oh. The hug was a tightening hug, but a nice embracing. And then I gave her a kiss, and once I gave her the kiss, we let go of the embracing. Oh, Penny, am I delighted? Isn't it a delight to see you? I said happily. Oh, Foxy, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy I've came on holiday here over from Wisconsin. So wonderful to see you. But little did I know that as we were talking outside, somebody was standing across the road. It was a black lady who was about my height, but probably a bit heavier than I am, by say about a stone or so, or maybe half a stone. And she was a spy, but I didn't even know this. She somewhat knew who I was. And meanwhile, outside of the Hove Museum, in a hotel in Hove, there was to be room service given on a door. Knock, knock, knock. Room service. There in the room service were a group of people. It was a group of 5 people. There was a man, roughly 6'1½", blue-eyed blonde. He was looking in a German dictionary, trying to learn German. Terence said. Terence was speaking German. But there, sitting opposite him, who was helping him to correct things in case he got wrong, a German man called Claude, who was a great big, very, very, very muscular, 7'2", light brown haired, blue-eyed man, very, very imposing, muscular-like figure, and just corrected Terence speaking in German. And he had a gun in his hand. "Put that away," said a voice. That was one of the men in the hotel. His name was Randall. If any of the hotel staff sees that you have guns, they're going to think you've got illegal possession of it, which you clearly have because you don't have a license. And so Claude quickly hid his pistol into his fleece pocket and said, "Oops, sorry," he said with his German accent. "Excuse me, do you know where Mr. Gunter is?" said the hotel staff. "Sir Gunter," Terence said rudely to the hotel staff. "He's in the room, and he doesn't take no meals on wheels." Shocked by the response, the hotel staffman did not say a word, but instead just continued wheeling the meals on the wheels to the room where Mr. Gunter was. There, in the man, was a man who was blonde, hazel-eyed, roughly 6 foot tall, a reasonably roundish face, and wore glasses. Although he had a few prominent shades of grey, or a prominent streak of grey at the front of his hair, but mostly still blonde. And fairly old, about middle age, in his 50s, he was looking out the window, overlooking the scenery and the nice streaming sunshine. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" said Heinz Gunter. "Oh, it is, sir." "Here you are, Sir Gunter, here's your meal." "Thank you," he said. "You enjoying your day today, as it's almost Easter?" Gunter said. "Oh, yes. It's an exciting time of year, Easter, isn't it? Always keeps us busy, and lots to smile about when we're busy," said the hotel staffman. "Here's everything, and you have a good day, and happy Easter," said the hotel staffman, and "Thank you, sir. Bye-bye," Mr. Gunter said politely, and so the hotel staffman, his frowned face changed to a bright, happy smile, and he walked respectfully out of the room. Meanwhile, as the hotel staffman left, there was the other remaining 4 men, Terence, Claude, Randall, and Jonathan. Before long, there was a there was a ringtone. "Hello?" Jonathan picked up his smart telephone or cell phone and said, "Oh, hello." "Oh, yes, Miss Boter," he said. "What? Foxy? He went into the Hove Museum?" And then, taking his hand off the phone and looking towards Terence and Claude, he said, "Foxy, he's here. He's Trevor Colt's friend." Jonathan said, Okay, I'll send 2 people out immediately. And then he ended the call, and then putting on his coat, putting on his fleece, zipping it up, and then putting on a coat, and said, "Yeah, I'm out." Terence said, "Let's go, Claude." And so the 6'1.5" blue-eyed blonde man and the 7'2" muscular man stepped up, and as the 7'2" Claude got his fleece on and put it on, but leaving it unzipped, given his muscular build, he wouldn't have needed so many clothes because it would have kept him nice and warm. They both set off and walked out of the hotel room on their way to the Hove Museum, but fortunately it was going to take them a long time to walk over there, as they only wanted to walk, as it was such a nice day. Then meanwhile, at the Hove Museum, myself and Penny were happily having some wonderful, wonderful giggles. But Penny first had to give me a second hug because I was cold. And she's like, "Oh, you're feeling cold, aren't you?" I was like, "Oh, you know me, Penny. I always feel the cold a lot, sadly." But then she gave me a nice second comfort hug to keep me, at least to warm myself up slightly, even if it didn't help 100%. But obviously after that, we sat down at the cafe table and enjoyed our little cafe refreshment. We were both laughing and giggling as I was having a cake and lemonade and Penny was having cheese scones with cream and jam and a nice cup of English tea. We were both laughing and giggling, and we were recounting the time over a funny live stream Annabelle had done. Oh yes, and remember what Karen Morell said, and I introduced you to Karen Morell. Remember, Penny? I said, "Oh yes, you spoke so highly of Karen Morell to me, Foxy," Penny said. "Honestly, and I couldn't help but warmly greet Karen. Aren't we happy to have such a lovely lady in our lives?" "Oh yes, I think we're going to meet one of these days, the 2 of us, whilst for the rest of the time you're over, aren't we?" "Oh, definitely, Foxy," Penny said in an exclaimed loud voice. "Of course we're going to meet Karen. She even arranged for us to meet one day at a nice pizza restaurant, and we'll have a nice pizza together." We were all giggling. And so as we continued to laugh and giggle, I finished off my nice lemon drizzle cake, and Penny finished off her cheese scones with cream and jam in it, and then I finished off my nice lemonade, and Penny respectfully finished off her nice tea. Before long, it was time to leave our table. Obviously, we'd paid for everything in advance before our refreshment got served to us. And so, before long, it was time for us, myself and Penny, to explore the Hove Museum. We began to have a look. Everything was silent as the staff at the reception had gone to have their lunch break in the cafe. And then Penny had a look in the gift zone at the Hove Museum. Oh, these cute gifts. I think I'd like to purchase one of them once we've finished exploring the museum. Certainly, Penny. I think you'll find something very nice to purchase, I said. And so we began to look in the lower decks of the museum. And once we had our look, we began to walk upstairs, but little did we know that Terence and Claude were getting nearer and nearer and nearer to the museum. But as we were walking upstairs, meanwhile, just outside of the Hove Museum, Terence and Claude had approached nearly the complete first level entry of the Hove Museum, where Miss Rachel Boter stood to greet them. The British black woman looked towards the 2 very tall Terence and the extremely tall, imposing 7-foot-plus Claude, looking up at Claude, and she had to decide whether to look up or look fairly elevated levels because of the one extremely tall man and one very tall but not so extremely tall, but taller than her. She was like, "Well, Terence, Claude, all I saw was that Foxy walked into the Hove Museum. Don't do anything stupid. I'll be keeping my eye on you. Got it, Miss Boter, Terence said, but he wasn't paying complete attention. He wanted to get up to violence, and so Terence, Claude, and Miss Rachel Boter slowly walked their way into the Hove Museum entrance. But just before they entered, myself and Penny were happily having a look upstairs in the Hove Museum at some of the old exhibits and things. This is very interesting. Oh, Foxy, this is so wonderful. Honestly, Penny, I did tell you you would never regret going here. And as we were walking, with Penny wrapping her arm around my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulder, we both walked together as if we were already very, very close friends. I did let her go when we wanted to part ways. Normally we'd walk together. Sometimes I would let Penny walk in front of me, or sometimes we'd walk side by side with arms wrapped around each other, as a means of representing a close, good friendship. Our observations continued, whereas meanwhile, Miss Rachel Boter, or Agent Miss Rachel Boter, really she's a government agent, and Terence and Claude were already in the reception area observing the Hove Museum. Nice little place in here. Just a shame I'm too tall, Claude said. Well, can't see Foxy, Terence said. I wonder where he is. And then before long, a member of staff came over. Oh, excuse me, can I help you? We're looking for someone, said Miss Rachel Boter. Excuse me, are you the police? It will just be a few moments. And then the member of staff walked over, and there was Claude observing and looking through everything in the gift zone. She looked towards the 7-foot guy, almost looking visibly intimidating, not just because of his extremely tall height, but because of his sheer physical, muscular build. She was like, oh, excuse me, can I help you? Claude looked towards the lady, considerably shorter than he was, and said, no thank you, he said. And just then Randall walked in. Did you find Foxy? What's he up to? We haven't found him yet. You know, there's always upstairs, but we're being questioned. Oh, excuse me? My colleague, said the member of staff, but before she could walk over, she was punch, poof. She was assaulted to the point where she was knocked out and knocked unconscious and fell to the floor. Miss Rachel Boter saw the assault case and saw that it was in fact Terence who had committed aggravated assault towards a Hove Museum staff member. Stop what you're doing. What the hell do you think you're doing? Rachel Boter said angrily. Just practicing karate, Terence said, feigning his innocence. Then another staff member walked over and was like, what the heck is going on, she said. And then before long, the 7-foot guy, Claude, walked over towards the staff member and punched the staff member in the face, knocking out the staff member with a single punch. Miss Rachel Boter looked and glared crossly towards both Claude and Terence, but Terence, looking rather innocent, said, no witnesses. But meanwhile, upstairs, myself and Penny, we didn't know what had happened, and we were not aware of the assault, the just committed aggravated assault case from downstairs. It's always worth going around here, Penny, I said. How are you finding the observations of the wonderful museum? Penny, walking over towards me, and was like, oh, Foxy, I couldn't thank you enough for recommending this very cute and wonderful museum to me. It's just so, I've become so interested and nearly almost accustomed already to British culture compared to American culture. But if excuse me, what's up there? Said the voice, and this interrupted Penny from saying her very sentence to me, and before long, looking terrified and shocked, wondering where the voice came along, there was Terence walking with a pistol gun in his hand, pointing it towards myself and Penny, and said, "Don't move." "Foxy, we need to get out of here," Penny said. "You're right." And just as we began to escape, Terence began to open fire. "Oh no." And I stopped, but Penny kept running. I was like, "Penny, wait!" I said, "Foxy, you got to be quick." And then before long, Penny clambered up on the shelves and saw an open window and escaped. I was like, "Come on, Foxy." I tried to, but just as I was about to reach the shelf, Terence shot the shelf and it just fell and collapsed. And I was like, "Penny, wait! No, Penny!" But Penny had already left. She luckily knew what to do before I did and was quicker than I was to escape. Penny was now running on the roof and jumped on a few lower decks, and then, fortunately not jumping too far down, otherwise she would have been killed and splattered, jumped on the floor and ran away completely to safety, whereas I was figuring out a way to escape, only to get on a shelf and then, it began to fall, and there was the 7'2" Claude. He tried to run, but the shelves fell on him, but luckily it did not fall on him to the point where it would completely squash him. Crash, kaboom, bang, wallop. I was like, and there I saw the guy, and the 7'2" muscular guy quickly pushed off the shelf off of him, and I quickly tried to run as quickly as I could, only to be punched in the face. And I looked, and there was Terence, and put a bag right over me. I was like, "Ow, hey, let me go, let me go." I was like, and then the 6'1.5" guy, half Claude and blue-eyed blonde Claude, Terence, and the 7'2" brown hair, blue-eyed Claude both grabbed hold of me and dragged me out down the stairs of the museum, and before long out we went, going out of the museum, and there was a van where I was dragged right in. Miss Rachel Boter followed alongside Randall. Jonathan was driving. And before long, as quick as a wink, the van quickly drove away from the Hove Museum, whereas in the distance there were sirens wailing. Obviously it was going to be the police and the ambulance to find who the aggravated assault assailant was within the Hove Museum. But obviously the assailants were gone. Meanwhile, inside the van, Randall pulled the bag off of my head, and there I was, sat next to the very, very tall, imposing and muscular 7'2" Claude, and opposite me was the black British woman, Agent Rachel Boter, and there, also next door, sat opposite me, was Terence. "What exactly do you have to do with Trevor Colt?" Rachel Boter asked in an interrogated way. She began interrogating me, knowing why I was associated with Trevor Colt. "Trevor Colt is my good friend," I responded in frustration to Rachel. "He's my good friend. Sometimes we meet up, whether I'm in Suffolk or if he comes down to Brighton, or if we're going to an event together. He's a good friend of mine. He's not done anything bad to me." "Why do you ask?" "And what exactly were you doing here in Hove Museum?" As Rachel asked, as she pressed on with the interrogation. "Lady, I was meeting up with my good new friend Penny." And as we continued driving, the van suddenly stopped. There was a parade going on in Churchill Square. So that meant there could be no buses going into the Churchill Square. They had to be diverted along the seafront way. But fortunately, there were buses. Luckily, there were to be buses in the Old Steam range and all that, but not in the Brighton Churchill Square city centre range. And because the road was blocked, Jonathan, who was driving the van, tried to reverse, only to drive backwards into a taxi. The taxi driver got out of the cab and angrily said, "What the hell are you doing, you stupid driver? What are you going, bad guy?" And so there was only one other alternative. Terence and Claude were to drag me out across the Churchill Square parade. They had abducted me so that they could take me to Heinz Gunther for interrogation. It was obvious I was wanted by Heinz Gunther for something seriously bad. And so I was dragged out with, on the left-hand side of me, holding me very tightly by the arm, was the 6'1.5" blue-eyed blonde Terence, and beside me on the right, holding, and it was rather painful when he was grabbing hold of my arm, was the very, very tall, muscular, 7'2" Claude. And as the 6'1.5" and 7'2" men dragged me across the Churchill Square parade, I ended up hearing a saying, "Hell no, we won't go! Hell no, we won't go!" And then I joined in saying, "Hell no, we won't go! Hell no, we won't go!" "Shut up! Shut up!" Terence shouted. And after I saw Terence get distracted, I immediately punched him in the face and knocked over, and there he let go of me and almost fell over backwards. Then I picked up a sign after Terence let go of me and whacked right to Terence, and then there he didn't come near me. And looking in horror was the 7'2" Claude, and I tried to whack the wooden sign on him, and once I whacked it, it broke in half, and there was just a piece of wood in my hand. And then before long, angered by what I attempted, Claude attempted to punch, and I ducked just in time, because had I been punched in the face by the muscular 7-foot man, it would have knocked me out instantly. And then I began to run. And then, as I ran, there became a chase pursuit. The 7'2" muscular man, Claude, began to chase me around the streets of Churchill Square. As I began running, he would not hesitate but to run in pursuit. And Terence, who got out his pistol gun ready to shoot to frighten the parade, Rachel rushed over towards him and stopped him. A chase ensued. Before long we reached North Street, and I had to keep running, though out of breath and weary, dragging across my 5'8" and 11-stone figure, running and running and running as fast as I could to get away from the 7'2" man. I had to keep running, because had I stopped running, he would have just gotten me and dragged me back to Terence and Agent Rachel Bota. Before long, we reached the lanes, and I had to take a bike. "Oh, please, I need a bike, could I?" "Oh, yes, go ahead, take it," said the person. And then I took the bike as a means to keep myself safe, and began to cycle away so that I could keep going. Otherwise, the 7'2" Claude would have caught up with me far too easily. I began to whiz along the lanes on the bicycle, ringing the bell of the bike, saying, "Out of the way! Out of the way! Chase in pursuit! Chase in pursuit!" Fortunately, everyone took me seriously, and I whizzed by. And as I whizzed by, there came, whizzing by, running, 7'2" Claude, and the people realised I was in danger. I whizzed and cycled as fast as I could, I was beginning to go faster than Claude, and I went along one way, but Claude didn't see where I went, so he ended up running the wrong direction. And so I whizzed and whizzed on the bike until I could find a bus stop so I could escape for safety. And before long, I found a bus stop. I got off, I put the bike somewhere to park, but how wrong could I have been to have outsmarted the people? Agent Rachel was running and saw me in the distance, but luckily there was a bus at the bus stop, so I rushed to the bus, got out the key card, pressed it on the machine, and as the bus doors shut, the bus was just leaving as Rachel got to the doors as it was leaving, and then walking towards the windows and saw me, and seeing me on board the bus left, and she pulled a glared look on her face. But little did I know she was actually a good guy, and she was investigating the actions of Terence and Claude and all the bad stuff they did. The bus left just in time. Rachel, glaring, walked over towards Churchill Square, but there came running, panting and exhausted, was Claude and Terence, and she had stern words for Claude and Terence. "You let Foxy escape, you trigger-happy idiots! You frightened a parade, and what you did was bad. How is your boss, Mr. Gunter, going to take to that?" she asked. "I don't know. We're just going to have to see what the boss will say," Terence said. "I don't know," Claude said, "but we shall see what boss will say." Meanwhile, at the hotel, Heinz Gunter was having a conversation with one of his friends. One of his friends he was talking to. But then, before long, his friend had to go, and he gave the greeting to say goodbye. But before long, he got a telephone call from Rachel Boter. "Yep, hello, Miss Boter." "Oh, Mr. Gunter," Rachel said. "Foxy and Penny got away. Foxy got away. Your two idiot men unsuccessfully tried to capture him, only for him to escape during the parade. So what words have you got to say for them?" Gunter hardly said a word. He ended up having an idea in hand. Knowing that I was going to be wanted for aggravated assault when in fact I was truly innocent, he decided to come up with a plan, and he surmised I was going to escape abroad and go on a run, so that I would avoid capture. "Wait a moment." And then he got off the phone and was about to end the call, but he ended the call, but Rachel was still on the phone and wondering whether Heinz Gunter was still talking to her about the matter. She went, "Hello?" And before long, Jonathan came in and said, "We lost Foxy. What now, boss?" "Well, I've got an idea," Heinz Gunter said. "Let's go to Austria. One of Foxy's friends is over there. He's obviously going to go over there and escape to Austria to seek help from his friend." Meanwhile, evening time fell, and there was lots of news on the television of the aggravated assault cases at the Hove Museum. And it turned out that the police were looking for me. I was stood beside the television shop, looking at what the news had to represent. And standing beside me was a short and stocky 5'5" man with a full head of dark hair, a bit longer than mine, and hazel eyes. He ended up giggling, and when he saw what I looked like on the man, which was me, a picture of me, publicity picture, and he giggled and laughed. I was like, this guy, he looks like you. He was an American tourist. Then I stood, turning towards the man, and was like, no. Oh no. Denying it was me, so I lied to the man. But the American tourist saw through my lie, and his excited face fell to a very cross and angry look, and said, it is you. I was like, no. I was like, go home, sir, you're drunk. But then, this is the guy! It's the assailant! The American man began shouting, but before long, out of nowhere came a punch in the face, poosh! And with a mighty second punch, the man was knocked over. There was David Scott. Sorry I'm late, Foxy, he said after he was looking at his hand to see if he hadn't had too much bruises for punching the man in the face and knocking him out as self-defense, really to keep me safe and to avoid me being wrongly captured, knowing I was innocent of the aggravated assault case at the Hove Museum. Yes, right, I got stuck in traffic. Let's go. And so the 5'4.5" man ran towards his car with the engine running, parked beside the road, and I ran to the front driver's seat of the car so that we could avoid being seen and so that we were not going to be known for aggravated assault with the American tourist. And as we ran to the car, we left behind an unconscious American tourist just laying there on the pavement. And so we opened the doors, quickly got into David's car, shut the doors quickly, and whoosh, off we went. David drove the car as fast as he could so that we could not be seen. Tyres screeching, off we went, and screech. And just as we were getting moving, then I looked towards David, physically exhausted from the running, and looking towards him said, goodness gosh, am I glad to see you, David, I said, looking at him. I wish I could say the same, my good old friend Foxy, David said. We'll make the jump to Peter Mackett's. Yes, let's go as fast as we can, I said. Okay, I'll do what I can, Foxy, David said, and we kept driving. After a long drive later and a long while later, we made it to Peter Mackett's residence. We quickly got out of David's car and we saw some people walking in the distance and we assumed they knew I was a wanted man. Peter was luckily out to greet us. So, come on in, you two. And Peter ran as fast as he could into his house. And there, David slowly running, and I began to slowly run after he said, quickly, Foxy, inside. And we quickly, but becoming rather physically exhausted, slowly, but really with all effort we could, began to run inside Peter's house, and Peter immediately let us inside his house. Before long, we were all sat around a table. Myself, David, Peter, and as well, Thomas Gavioli was sat at the table with us as well. What a real mess going on. Foxy is now accused of a crime he simply never committed, Peter said. And there's more, Peter continued. You managed to escape, and you are apparently abducted by two men, almost attempted abduction or attempted kidnapping. Those men are really the ones to have been arrested and locked up in jail. Peter said, you're too right about that, I said to Peter. I mean, what those men did to you, that was so bad, Thomas said. Yeah, I mean, you didn't deserve to be abducted by those two men. And I mean, Foxy, you could have been killed. I was like, no, I mean, I was frightened and visibly intimidated. And saying it to the whole table, to David, Peter and Thomas, I was like, I was abducted by an almost 6'2" man. He must have been nearly 6'2", blue-eyed blonde, and an over 7 foot muscular guy who momentarily dragged me around Churchill Square as the parade was going on. But then I managed to escape to safety when they got distracted by me and other people shouting, "Hell no, we won't go, hell no, we won't go," that sort of thing. What a mess, Foxy. You really didn't deserve any of this, Peter said. But what to do now, I asked. I think we need to enlist the help of something and we need to come up with a plan. Thomas said, I think you need a plan, Foxy, as far as you'll find. Suddenly I had an idea. I realised my friend Susan Reich was on holiday in Austria. And I looked towards David and I said, I need a ride to the airport, David. But David, looking rather concerned towards me, and said, Foxy, if you run, the police will assume that you're guilty of the aggravated assault crime. And I was like, without Penny or enlisting the help of Thomas and Peter, or even Karen, who's also on holiday here, I'm going to get framed for aggravated assault. We've got to go and enlist the help of Susan Reich. That it's possible, Heinz Günther, it's possible these people are going to find out that I'm in this. It's possible that they're going to find out, but we've got to take this risk. Reluctant, but wasn't going to say anything, David was like, you thought about calling your parents, Foxy, about what's happened? I was like, they would just stop me completely if I said anything to them, and then if they stop me, I'm just going to get badly framed for a crime I did not commit. David was reluctant, as was Peter and Thomas, but they knew I was up for something, and they knew that what I did was potentially the only way forward to clear my name, or to get me cleared of the aggravated assault crime. But Peter Mackett said, "Oh, I'm not going to do the escape to Austria, so sadly I'm pulling out." And I'm pulling out too, I'm getting a bit old for this, Thomas said. Who could we? I wonder who we could do. And then I had an idea. We could enlist the help of Tommy Gardiner, and certainly will I enlist the help of Penny and Karen, and also let's enlist the help of Ian Postlethwaite. David wasn't certain, but he knew I had an idea. Right, okay, yeah. Yeah. I think you could be up for something, mate. Yes, let's enlist the help of Tommy Gardiner. And so, after we had our tea at Peter Mackett's house, we left Peter Mackett's and I got into the car and we drove, and David drove his way towards Tommy Gardiner's residence, because I'd rang him beforehand. We got to Tommy's residence and greeted him, and Tommy walked into to David's car, and there, sitting in the back seat, he was like, as we drove away, he said, Foxy, don't worry, I know you're innocent, and I'm going to help you with anything you need, okay? Thanks, Tommy, and thank you, David, for helping me. We've got to get to Austria soon. Yeah, no, we're up for the flight, yeah. Before long, we arrived at London at Gatwick Airport. We parked the car in the car park, and obviously David put the parking permit in his car, and myself, David and Tommy walked our way towards the airport entrance. But obviously beforehand they'd stopped at my residence and I could pick up a spare jumper and a spare tie, and of course my little man bag, which was all in my bag, and also my flannel and hair comb should I need a shower if we were staying over in a hotel or not. And there, as we walked to the airport terminal, myself, David and Tommy, we were greeted by Penny, Karen and Ian Postlethwaite. Oh, Foxy, I'm so glad you're safe, Penny said as she ran towards me and gave me a great big hug in comfort. And Ken was like, "Oh, Foxy, it's you." And she, after Penny had embraced me tightly and let go, she began to hug and embrace me tightly. "Oh, thank goodness you're okay. Whatever's happened? I just heard what's happened to you, as you said." "We can't say it out loud, Karen and Penny. And you too, Ian. It's so awful, but we got to do this." Yeah. "Really, this is wrong, but I can see the idea you've come to, Foxy," Ian said. "We stand beside you in your endeavours, and we're going to help you get cleared of the crime, because we know you did not do it and you're innocent," Ian said. With all six believing my innocence, well, the 5 people believing my innocence thoroughly, being David, Tommy, Ian, Penny and Karen. After we all greeted one another at the airport, we got checked in the airport, getting our luggage checked in, but we didn't really have any luggage except for me, as I didn't really take very much with me. Just a little bag, a few clothes, obviously the camera and things. And fortunately I didn't take anything that could have been, banned on the aeroplane, so I was lucky. As long as I got it checked through, we were fine. And so we got checked through, got our tickets and passports so that we could fly to Austria to team up with Susan to get her, so that she could help us to get me cleared of a crime I never committed. We had to wait a little while before we could board the plane, but before long our Austria plane, we could board on it. Once the check process was done and we boarded the plane, we sat on the aeroplane, and it was nearly about, and it wasn't time for it to leave the terminal yet, but before long it was due to leave the airport terminal, and before our very eyes, about to take off to fly. It was late at night, and obviously we were going to be arriving at Austria in the very early hours of the next day. After a good few hours of flying, we arrived in Austria, and we got in a large taxi to accommodate all 6 of us to get to the hotel where Susan was staying at. Obviously we paid our fare beforehand, so we could get out of the taxi. I got out the taxi first, then David got out, then Tommy, then Penny, and then Karen and Ian. And before long the large 8-seater taxi left, and we walked our way into the hotel. We got walking up the stairs, there was a lot of partying going on in the hotel. We were in the casino part of the hotel. I was looking everywhere. Myself, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen and Ian, we were looking everywhere for Susan, but we just could not find her. "Oh, this is an interesting one. I want a party here," Tommy said. "This is just as fun as listening to a fairground organ." Come on, Tommy. This is, we've really got, Foxy needed us urgently for this matter, and we need to help him because we need to clear him of a crime," David said. Tommy really wanted to party with everybody in the casino part of the Austrian hotel, but he knew that David was right and he had to help me get cleared of a crime I never committed. Before long, we found an entrance, and there I could just about see Susan sitting, observing the casino part, reading her book. And I was like, "Oh, there's the entrance. Let's go to the entrance now." And there was a hotel boy. As we were walking, he grabbed hold of my wrist and was like, "It's a private casino in there, sir," said the boy, assuming I spoke English. And so he spoke English to me with his Austrian accent. "I've got to get in there," I said crossly. "No password, no entry. I don't make the rules." "I'm sorry, youngster," Tommy said, "but Foxy is right. It's very important. It's so urgent. Our friend is in there and we need her help urgently. If we don't get her help, something bad will happen to all of us." The boy didn't know what to do, but reluctantly let all of us in. And so I, leading everybody, walked forward with David behind me, and Tommy behind David, and then Penny behind Tommy, and Karen behind Penny, and Ian behind Karen. We walked over towards Susan. "Ah, hello, Susan." "Foxy," Susan said, "what are you doing here? What a surprise to see you." I gave Susan a quick little hug as a nice greeting. And then I said, "It's awful. It's absolutely awful. We got to talk in private, because otherwise otherwise something bad will happen to us all." So we found a little private spot, and Susan followed us to the private spot. Susan was shocked to hear what I was accused of when I was fully innocent. "You would never do anything like that. I'd never known you to do such a thing, Foxy. You're a very good man. You're a very nice, lovely man, and you would never do such a thing." "Yeah, I know," David said. "It's just such a shame he's been accused of a crime he never committed, and he's now wanted for it. It's just so awful. I mean, I'm so shocked it happened. But let's get out. Now that we said what we needed to say, Susan, let's get back to the casino part, but we're not going to partake." "Rest assured, Foxy," Susan said, "I have not taken part in any casino activities." "I can't believe this happened to you." But then there was trouble. Just as we were about to leave the casino part, there came Heinz Gunther walking in, leading the charge, and with the Austrian boy trying to stop Gunther's henchman walking in. Walking behind Gunther was the 7'2" Claude, and shoved the boy right out of the way so that he wouldn't be stopped from entering the casino part. And behind Claude was the 6'1.5" Terence, who also shoved the boy out of the way to stop him from entering the casino part. And with the boy now visibly intimidated and scared, all of Gunther's henchmen walked in, with the remaining ones being Randall and Jonathan walking behind Terence. "You going somewhere?" "I thought we were going to have a game in the casino room," said Gunther. Then I just stared at Gunther. "You," I said in disgust. Gunther, suddenly looking rather confused, but with a slight smile at the same time, looked at me and said, "Have we met?" in his German accent. Susan, looking towards Gunther, said, "Oh, no, we haven't. My memory is a little fuzzy, but your face rings a bell." "Aren't you the foreign man? Aren't you the foreigner who painfully trolled Trevor Colt?" I asked. Susan was shocked by my questioning, but understood my point. And then Gunther said, "You're confused. My name is Hamburg. Mr. Hamburg, who teaches mathematics at secondary school." "Oh, Mr. Hamburg," Susan said, but not realizing it was actually Heinz Gunther who had trolled Trevor Court. "Well, how nice to see you. You should teach us some maths, because sometimes our maths gets a little rusty as we get older, but at least I've got some mental mathematics or arithmetic, although it's not quite as good as Foxy's." "Well, okay, we should have a little lesson, and then I'll teach you some fractions and things. That's funny, the last time I saw the other guy who looks like you, he was also proposing to do something similar, but then ended up trolling Trevor when Trevor didn't want to do something that was completely optional," I said crossly. "Well, Your mathematics is valued, Mr. Hamburg, Susan said. Well, you know, Miss Reich, I thought I thought maybe, seeing you know Trevor Court, I thought we'd have a little discussion about what you know about him and that sort of thing. Don't do this, Susan. That is dangerous what you're going to do. Susan, not wanting to upset me or put herself in danger, she was in a little bit of a difficult decision. But then, before long, a riot ensued. Over a disagreement, I got punched in the face by Terence. And then once someone saw me being punched, a riot ensued. And then someone attempted to attack Claude, but then Claude, who obviously didn't get hurt by the man attempting to hit him, he grabbed the guy and chucked him across the table, and the riot just ensued into a full violent frenzy, with people punching each other and like throwing things. Oh, it was chaos. And as someone got shucked over, or fell over from being punched, got up and stood beside me, but assuming he was going to strike me, I punched him in the face and ran. All of us, all 7 of us, ran for our lives from the hotel, only to be chased and pursued by Heinz Gunther, Terence, Claude, Randall and Jonathan. Now with the fighting going on, it seemed like there was going to be fighting going on almost everywhere in the casino. No, part of the hotel, since the rioting fight ensued. Susan, now in a difficult decision to find the best way out to avoid being accused of the rioting, since she never did any of the rioting, she accidentally ran into Gunther and was like, "Excuse me, madam." But then she got assaulted and whacked onto the floor by Terence and Claude. Susan, laying on the floor, looking up in shock, horror and disgust as the 6'1.5" Terence and 7'2" Claude walked away, leaving her on the floor. She got back up, put her book in her little handbag and ran to safety to get to myself, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen and Ian. Before long we found Susan, and we ran towards the lift so that we could leave the hotel as quickly as we could. Only for Heinz Gunther, Terence, Claude, for Heinz Gunther to walk into the lift first. Trying to get myself in, it was locked. "See you in hell, Foxy," Heinz Gunther said to me. "Your life will be miserable before you know it." I knew my life in the future would be at dangerous stake. So I knew what action to take. Rallying David, Tommy, Penny, Karen, Ian and Susan, we all ran to the nearest exit of the hotel possible. We left the hotel as dawn began to break upon the skies. And we had to run to find some transport. So in a way, we were running as fast as we could, only to run past accidentally, but not realizing it, well not accidentally, but inadvertently, we were running past Heinz Gunther and all his henchmen. They got their guns out as they pursued and gave chase to us, shooting at us. I was like, "Oh no, we gotta run. We almost got killed," Susan said. As it turns out, we're being spied upon by a troll who did something severely bad to Trevor. I was actually beginning to wonder whether Mr. Hamburg was a real maths teacher. He's a troll, a foreign troll who's been blocked by Trevor, but now he's seeking revenge on Trevor by doing something bad to me, I said to Susan as we were running in self-defense for safety to get away from the dangerous Heinz Gunther and his henchmen. As we were running, we found a tuk-tuk. I was to be driving the tuk-tuk, and myself and David sat in the front, and everybody rushed in and squeezed in at the very back of the tuk-tuk, and vroom, off we went. Heinz Gunther and his men didn't get into the tuk-tuk, but instead found a limo-like car and decided to steal it, to chase after us. As the people got out of the limo, Heinz Gunther sat in the back, and all of his henchmen sneaked in the limo and stole the limo to chase after us. A chase ensued in the streets of Austria with me and everybody in the tuk-tuk and Heinz Gunther giving chase to all of us. We knew this could probably last a great few hours to chase. But fortunately, even though I was driving the tuk-tuk, I had to have some tactical thinking as a means to keep us all safe. "Foxy, do be careful. I just hope you know what you're doing," Penny said. "Don't worry, Penny. I can figure things out, even though I don't know this Austrian town very well. I can always try my best," I said as I was driving the tuk-tuk at almost breakneck speed, and following behind us at almost breakneck speed as well was Gunther and his henchmen in the stolen limousine car, going as fast as we could. The chase ensued. It was a big pursuit, but we knew that it was just going to last almost indefinitely if I didn't find, say, a passageway that would be small enough for the tuk-tuk to get through, but too big for the limo to fit through. So I found a passage, and vroom, down we went. Ah! The girl screamed, Susan, Penny and Karen, as we were going down the hill of the passage because they were in shock, and off a slope and down, and crash into a wall. "What on earth?" Susan said. "Gosh, that was scary. I almost had a heart attack in fright." "Gosh, Foxy, that was dangerous," Penny said. "I think we've lost them now," I assumed. And I tried to drive the tuk-tuk backwards, but I realised we were stuck, so I had to use my foot on the stair to get it off, and it reversed back slightly, and I tried to get it moving, and "Oh, come on, vroom." Off we went. And we drove and drove, but wondering where we were in the stolen limo, Heinz Gunther and his henchmen were just driving casually around an Austrian town. I think we lost them, but I think we should figure out where they're going to go to next. I think they're going to go to Italy via the long way. However, but that was just a conclusion Heinz Gunther came under. And before long, after so much whizzing around and a lot of dangerous driving in the tuk-tuk, but fortunately not caught by the police, the tuk-tuk was beginning to get very worn and was slowly breaking down. But fortunately we believed there could be another mile or so to get to a train station so that we could escape Austria, away from the country, because we still believed we could possibly be in pursuit despite having lost Gunther and his henchmen. But then there was trouble. The tuk-tuk broke down, and it would not budge any further. Oh gosh, oh dear, I said. At least we're not too far from a train station. We got out of the tuk-tuk. Myself, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen, Susan and Ian. As we stepped out of the tuk-tuk, we began to discuss what to do next. This is a difficult situation, I said. We're stuck in Austria. There's a broken down tuk-tuk, and now there are dangerous trolls after me, and I'm wanted for a crime I never committed, so we're in a very complicated predicament. You are certainly quite right, Tommy said. It's not doable, but we can always think of a possible solution, Tommy said. Yeah, David said. Well, it is going to be complicated, but I think we'll eventually get our neck around this and all that. I think it's possible we should hide out in the Isle of Sicily in Italy, I said. How are we going to get there? We're just going to have to fly more than once. We're not going to have to fly more than once. We're only going to have to fly once, and then there's something special, I said. What's the something special? Karen asked in confusion. We get a boat. Everybody looked at me and asked, what boat? They all asked. Then I said, I've got a good new friend, Ferdino, who does diving videos whenever he's going out on his boat. A big, marvellous, enchanted boat that he and his friends go on a certain evening before sailing back. And certainly on his days off of work, he sails on the boat far out to sea and spends the night out to sea on his boat. He could help us get to the Isle of Sicily before Gunther and his henchmen. We'll need him, and I need all of you, and you know it. You've got to clear me from a crime that I never committed, remember. Realizing what I said was important, they all listened completely thoroughly to me, and so we walked our way to the train station. Though what this meant was that we had to take a long trip around Europe as a means to get the best connective service. But it was obviously going to be a very, very long time before we arrived in Spain. And before long, after long hours on the train going across various parts of Europe, we flew on an aeroplane. And we were to be landing in Spain. First in Madrid, but after Madrid we were to be going from Madrid to one of the Spanish coastal parts. Before long it was nightfall after a very, very long trip to get to Spain, the coastal place of Spain. We were not in a taxi, we were on the back of a truck, with myself standing up and everybody else being David, Tommy, Penny, Karen, Susan and Ian sitting down in the truck that was going towards a little marina port where there was an interesting boat. And as the truck got very close, or more or less really quite close to the boat, I went, tapped on the truck, and then I shouted, "Ferdy!" I shouted in excitement. He heard my voice, and there, a man talking to other men playing cards, a man began to turn, who had a roundish face, dark hair, light brown eyes, a white captain's hat, with a bright blue suit jacket, Hawaiian shirt, and grey trousers with brown brogues in a likely UK size 10, looked towards the truck, only to see me, and said, "Foxy? Foxy!" I laughed after I heard him shouting towards me in excitement. Then that was Ferdy, and Ferdy got up and walked off of his boat to greet us at the marina port. "So this is your friend?" Susan asked in excitement. "This is Ferdy, the very man himself, everybody," I said, and I got off the truck, because the truck actually belonged to Ferdy, but one of his men were driving it to deliver certain valuables. As I got off the truck, I walked on the pavement and said, off the marina port, I was like, "Ah ha ha, hey, hey, hey," I was giggling. And as everybody got off the boat, Susan was like, "Well, this is Foxy's friend, I believe." "Well, it certainly does look it, you know," David said. "Well, I could see why Foxy and Ferdy have a good friendship," Tommy said. "Honestly, it looks like their friendship is pretty cute," Karen said. "Ah, and I think we've got a good mode of transport," Penny said in unison. And before long, and then they saw me giving Ferdy a nice hug in greeting. And then I introduced Ferdy to all of my friends, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen, Susan and Ian. "I think we're ready to sail on a wonderful boat," Ian said. And so, as they walked faster towards Ferdy, and then I introduced them to Ferdy, and before long we all quickly boarded the boat, as Ferdy agreed to take us to the Isle of Sicily, so that we could get to the Isle of Sicily of Italy. Before long we were out to sea. As we were sailing out to sea, I was personally talking to Ferdy about what was going on and all the trouble that was happening. "Oh dear, Foxy, that is too bad," Ferdy said. "I know you're not that sort of guy. And you to be accused of a crime, that is so awful. But please, rest assured, we'll keep you and your friends entertained. You're always welcome on my boat any time I'm sailing. You know that," Ferdy said to me, and I knew what Ferdy said was true, because he was my good friend. And then Tommy Gardiner came in to the room, myself and Ferdy with him. "Oh, I hope I'm not interrupting you two," Tommy said as he walked in. "Oh, no, don't worry. Ferdy and myself, we finished our conversation, and he's going to keep us entertained. He and his men will keep us entertained, Tommy, as he and his men are sailing across the sea en route to the Isle of Sicily in Italy." "Brilliant stuff," Tommy said. "I think it's going to be a while before we get to the Isle of Sicily, but I think we're going to get there before, hopefully, this Mr. Gunter won't find out we're going to go. Let's hope he doesn't," I said to Tommy, really hoping that he wouldn't find out. Let's have a fun evening now, shall we?" Ferdy said. "Oh yes, Ferdy, let's enjoy the fun now." "Okay, let's go," they said. Before long, one of Ferdy's men began playing the harmonica, playing its soft, gentle harmonica-like tune as they were sailing. We all wine bottles got out ready, and before long, most of us were having a nice drink of red wine and all that. Karen was playing cards with Ferdy and one of his men. "I think 7 of spades," Karen said. Ferdy began laughing at the quality Karen had possessed. "How did you do that?" he asked. And then Karen eventually saw me, and then I was walking, holding a glass of red wine, having a little sip. She got the cards and said, "Pick a card, Foxy," Karen said. Guessing I wasn't sure what card to pick, so I picked a card, and I showed, and it was a 7 of spades. 7 of spades! Ha 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 ha! Ferdy laughed out loud. You know, your friend Karen, she's magic. Quite a game, I said. And then I gave the card. It's all right, you don't have to play. Enjoy your drink, Foxy. And then we're nearly finished with 7 of spades anyway, and then we're gonna have more fun this evening. We're gonna have even a meal. We've already eaten, Foxy, I said. But you know me, I don't want to go beyond 11.5 stone, Ferdy. So I'm not sure if having another meal for me is a good idea. Anybody could have another meal. Of course. We want to keep you entertained. Come on now. Don't be too obsessed with your body. I know you're not too obsessed, Foxy, but please don't be too obsessed, sir. I decided that just at this very occasional moment that I'd have a second dinner meal with my good friend Ferdy, because I knew how much my friendship meant to each other and how close our friendship is. Before long, it was time to dance and party. We had the meal, and then there was a dance going on. There was myself, Ferdy and David having a dance together whilst having a drink of wine together, and Tommy even had a dance too, as well as drinking. Then I had a dance with Penny. We both danced together to some nice music. And then I had a little dance with Karen. And then the rest of the time it was drinking and casual dancing. Whilst we were having so much fun, I forgot that I was a wanted man for a crime I'd never committed. It was just having such a ball, dancing and drinking on Ferdy's enchanted boat. But Karen was getting a bit worried about me. She walked up to me and said, "Foxy, I think you've had enough to drink." "Nonsense, Karen," I said. "I'm having a lot of fun. Come on, have a drink." I said, "Foxy, I don't want you getting drunk. I don't want you getting too drunk and hungover." I didn't think I was getting a little drunk, but I was getting a little bit tipsy. And then when she saw me having a drink and dancing, she was like, "Right, that's it. Come on, Foxy. I think this one needs to go to bed." And Karen dragged me away, as everybody else, it being Tommy, David, Penny, Susan and Ian, stayed up drinking and dancing. But David decided to follow once he saw Karen escorting me to a bedroom. Before long we were in the bedroom, and David decided that he wanted to go to bed as well. "Look, Foxy," Karen said, "I don't want you getting so drunk." "But Karen, I'm not drunk," I said. "I'm having fun. It's a great source of entertainment whilst I'm going through a lot of trouble." Yes, but Foxy, please, come on. But obviously I'd taken off my cardigan by that point, and I didn't have pyjamas, I only had a vest. But I was sleeping in my black trousers. But please, look, Foxy, get under the covers, come on, and go to sleep. I really don't want you getting so drunk to the point where you're hungover, because we could still be in pursuit by this Heinz Gunther," she said. "But please, Karen, I understand your concern, but I am old enough to decide when's enough for me to drink, and I do know my alcohol intake." And Karen was like, "I know, but please, this is an important matter, and because it's so vital, I just want you to be safe, okay?" Karen said. And I was, and you know what else? I was missing the best part. I was going to do my best dance and drink some wine. Best part and drink some wine, I said. But then Karen insisting I go to sleep and go to bed. She's like, okay, look, Foxy, lie down. She put me under the covers. Then she gave me a kiss and a little cuddle. And the kiss and the little cuddle was more than enough to send me happily to sleep. And then she left the room to get all the others to go to sleep, because she didn't want all the others getting very, very drunk to the point of being painfully hungover. Before long it was morning. I got up, got showered, and I borrowed Ferdy's razor to shave off the beard, and borrowed his shaving cream, which he didn't mind whatsoever because of how close our friendship was. But I wasn't to be getting dressed straight away. I was to get dressed in a diving suit because we were going to go snorkeling in the sea together as a means of entertainment. It was going to be myself and Ferdy and possibly a few others going snorkeling and swimming in the sea for a bit. Because we assumed it was going to be quite a while. It was going to really take some time before Gunter and his henchmen would catch us up or find out where we've gone to. After a nice breakfast, I walked outside of Ferdy's boat. And I was like, okay, whoever is sailing, we're going to go. Whoever is going to go for a swim, we're going to do it soon. And we're going to do it for 30 minutes straight. 30 minutes, he said, making himself clear. Who's going to come for a swim? Oh, I am, said a voice. Karen, with Penny walking behind her, both got their wetsuits on and was ready to put the snorkels on to go for a swim. Here we are, we're ready to swim with Foxy and you, Ferdy. Ah, hello ladies, good to see you here, and shall the fun begin? But then Ferdy realised something. He was missing his snorkel. He looked towards one of his men. I was like, where's my snorkel? He said, snapping. Oh, one of his men, holding the snorkel, chucked it towards him, and then he pointed crossly to his friend and said, you know not to take my snorkels. Don't be so naughty and don't push your luck, kid adult, he said. His friend, one of his friends on the boat, was being a little bit naughty and taking the mickey out of him. And so he put his snorkel on, and it was only going to be myself, Ferdy, Penny and Karen having a swim. Susan didn't want to swim, and neither did Ian, David or Tommy. They didn't want to swim either. And so I was like, you have a good swim, Foxy, won't you? Do come up after 30 minutes. Of course I will, I said boldly, and so I got the snorkels on, as did Karen and Penny and Ferdy. Once we got our snorkels on, we jumped off the boat and into the sea, and we began to swim. We all had a wonderful time. Ferdy took his videos on his underwater camera of himself and also getting myself, Penny and Karen in shot. We looked at the wonderful fish we saw, and we also encountered some dolphins. The dolphin looked at us, and I got a picture of me with a dolphin, and I even took a picture of Ferdy with a dolphin. And also we got a picture of Karen and Penny with a dolphin. But we were careful not to swim in a dangerous zone where there were dangerous sea creatures, so we were in the safe zone, luckily. As we were in the sea, it had not even been 5 minutes, and as Susan was reading her book sitting outside on the boat, she suddenly noticed an unusual looking sailboat in the distance. She didn't know what it was, but it was sailing heading quite fairly close towards us. As we were in the sea, it had not even been 5 minutes, but then I noticed a boat. I looked up and the boat parked beside Ferdy's boat. And then before long, we saw some people jumping off the boat and onto Ferdy's boat without permission. I sort of had a guess to know who they may be. And then before long, with a sudden quick jolt, Penny was pulled right up, and then up and out from the water, but still in the water, but not deep down. She looked towards Ferdy's boat in shock, only to see a very frightened looking Susan yelling, "Penny!" she yelled, and then she was restrained by the 7'2" Claude. Gunter and his henchman had sneaked aboard Ferdy's boat, and Claude began restraining the little 5'2" Susan Reich and pointing his pistol gun towards Penny. Myself, Ferdy, and Karen decided to swim up to the shore to see what was going on. Ferdy went up, got his snorkels off once he was up the top of the surface, and saw what was going on, as did myself and Karen. And so Penny got up first, but was dragged onto the boat as soon as she was about to climb up. "Ah!" she said as she was dragged up, rather than her getting up casually herself. Then myself and Ferdy and Karen walked onto the boat. And there, as we looked, we saw David and Tommy and Ian standing, putting their hands up, as Randall and Jonathan were holding them at gunpoint. And also all of Ferdy's crew, they were being detained because they disappeared. He thought they disappeared, but they were being detained alongside Tommy, David and Ian and Susan. Looking in shock and disgust, Ferdy was asking me, "Who are these people?" Then I looked towards Ferdy and I was like, "They're dangerous trolls, Ferdy," I said. "First, come to interrogation now, Foxy," Heinz Gunter demanded. Then I walked over and crossly confronted Heinz Gunter and said, "I should have reported you to the police when I had the chance, when you ended up trolling David." "I'm on my own now, Foxy," Gunter said. "But I've got some people to help me in case I need them." Things move forward, young Foxy, but sometimes they go backward. "Now let's get comfortable and we'll have a little talk," he said, and we were inside the boat rather than standing outside. We were all dressed. I got dressed in the shirt, maroon jumper and my blue-coloured coat and green tie, and Ferdy was dressed in his grey trousers, brown brogues, and I was wearing my black brogues, and his blue suit jacket and Hawaiian shirt. Ferdy's crew were all inside, and myself and I was sat on a bed with David sat next to me, and Penny was sat on the other side, the opposite side of us, on one of the opposite bunk beds. Ferdy was sitting on one of the bunk beds, and on the other side there was Karen, Tommy, Susan and Ian, and as well as Ferdy's small crew of men. And but guarding them was Terence and Randall, but the man guarding myself, David, Penny and Ferdy was Claude. What's going on now, boss? You're looking at a map. It's not a map. You're looking at a picture. It's not a picture, Gunter said. It's a map. A global map. Karen, looking towards me, and said, I owe you one for this, Foxy, she said, knowing that we were not expecting this to have happened so suddenly. Being that of Gunter eventually finding where we were, we knew it would happen, but we didn't think it would happen that quickly. After hearing what Karen said to me, I didn't need to respond directly to Karen, but then I looked towards Gunter and said, Not familiar with your geographical skills? I asked. Nope, Gunter said admittedly, but it appears you're very good with geography. And then he walked towards me and showed the picture, really a map, and said, No, can you tell us where we are, please? I just looked at the picture and Claude began to walk away from the bunk bed and decided to stand guard in another location. Ferdy was just looking directly towards me. There was a moment of silence. And after the one or so minute of silence, I looked at the picture for about a minute or two, and looking up at Gunter, I said, No. Gunter just looked at me in silence. Then he turned towards Ferdy, got out his pistol gun, and shot him right in his kneecap. Ah! Ah! Ferdy yelled. Then he picked up a baseball bat and then said, Foxy. And then speaking angrily in Spanish, he got up, about to, with his the baseball bat in hand, and then he got shot in his second kneecap and the shoulder, and because he was shot in both kneecaps, it physically impaired him and fell to the floor. And then being hit, and then he ended up being assaulted violently. And hearing the assaulted punches, I immediately got up from the bunk bed and ran, only to be blocked in the way by the 7'2" muscular Claude. I grunted, and then as I ran into him and grunted, I suddenly couldn't run any further, looking up at Claude, and then grabbed by his strong hands onto my arms, pushing me slowly, and shoved me right back onto the bunk bed. And then Gunter, walking over, standing beside Claude, showing the pictures, said, Feeling hopeful now, he said in a demanding way. Now, visibly intimidated and frightened, I looked towards Gunter in complete horror and shock, and did not say a word. And before I was about to say a word, Karen said, I am, she said, in response to Gunter's question, really, when he was questioning this to me. Then I looked and saw Karen get up, standing up, and said, I can tell you a lot of things geography-wise. No, I protested, and after I protested, I was punched right in the face by the muscular 7'2" Claude, sending me falling backwards and hitting the back of my head on the wall. No one dares, and before David could say anything else, the 7'2" muscular Claude punched David right in the face, instantly knocking him out and rendering him unconscious instantly in a single punch. I'm sorry, Foxy, Karen said, but these trolls but this is for our own safety. Getting up and looking crossly towards Karen, this really is important. I tell you all the locations and the geography. And then, if I tell them all, you leave us alone. Karen, I said in shock. Take it or leave it, Karen said, when offering the deal to Heinz Gunter. Looking towards Karen, Heinz responded to Karen and said, "You have a deal." Ferdy was groaning in absolute pain after being shot in the kneecaps and in the shoulder, but fortunately he was not dying, but would certainly need hospital treatment. So he was luckily not murdered, and obviously being assaulted after being shot. He was in a lot of pain. Then I looked towards Karen and said, "They'll never give you a deal," I said. Karen ended up talking geography. Well, where we are, we're not too far from the Aegean Sea in Greece. In a way, we're not too far from Africa. But if we go another way, we'd go, or say, sail the boat to the Atlantic or so, we'd be en route to America and things. Now this is interesting. Keep going further down. We'd be in the Oceania continent, getting towards Australia. Quite as easy as one thinks, really, when we're talking about it. She was walking around when talking, obviously walking first to Gunter and then to Terence and then walked towards me, and then she was like, "Now if we go to another continent, we're in South America," she said, standing close up to Claude and looking up at the muscular 7-foot-plus man. But also we head towards nearly the Panama part and almost United States of America. So if we go around this way, we would have effectively sailed around the world. And Karen began talking more and more, and then I saw some matches. And I gave the matches to Karen. And Karen began talking more. But here comes the strange part. Just as she was about to talk more geography, Terence wanted to cook a cup of cocoa for his men. "I don't know how to figure this out. Could you please help me? We sail any further, then we're going to go back to the Mediterranean." And then Karen chucked over the matches to Terence, because Terence couldn't turn on the stove, even though he turned some things on. He lit the match, and she was like, "Foxy, everyone, let's go." As Terence lit the match, he put it on the oven, and then he hit a switch, and poof! The stove was on fire! Then I got up as quickly as I could, picked up my hat and my bag and all my stuff, and myself, I had to drag an unconscious, well, David was just about regaining consciousness, but I had to drag him in the way I could, as did Penny too. Oh, and then myself, obviously Penny and David, Karen, Susan, Tommy and Ian, we all rushed off the boat to safety. The excessive fire on the stove was done as a distraction so that we could escape to safety. Fortunately, with the boat parked up close, David could just about jump on despite being not terribly conscious, and all of us jumped onto the boat that Heinz Gunter and his henchmen had come on before jumping onto Ferdy's boat, and we rushed away and drove the boat into action, getting away from Heinz Gunter and his henchmen, leaving behind an injured and wounded and assaulted Ferdy and his detained men. But just as we were escaping, Terence got his pistol gun out and began shooting at the boat, but the boat had sailed too far for him to shoot any more. So, in that case, he thought we had lost us. We were sailing and went far out to sailing on the boat. Karen was sailing the boat. David, Tommy, Ian, Susan, Penny, and myself, we were like the passengers, but I was standing up and not sitting down and looking very shocked and upset and very overwhelmed. As the boat was moving along the Aegean Sea, Penny looked towards my concerned look and said, "Foxy, what's wrong?" And then Karen was like, "Foxy, aren't you happy?" And looking at Karen's smile, I took offence. I was like, "My friend has just been wounded and assaulted." Karen's smile on her face suddenly fell and realised that what had happened to my friend was serious. "I'm sorry, Foxy. We had to leave poor Ferdy behind as a means to protect ourselves. I know it's not our fault, Karen, but I feel so sorry for my poor friend Ferdy." "I'm pretty sure Ferdy will be okay, Foxy," Tommy said. "He seems like a strong guy to me, but we really do appreciate your great concern for your wonderful friend. Hopefully he'll go to hospital and get treated, because he wasn't murdered, luckily." "Thank God for that," I said. Meanwhile, on Ferdy's boat, Gunter and his henchmen coughed from the smoke after the stove incident. And then Gunter got his binoculars out to see where the boat was going, the boat that we had stolen from him and his henchmen. And he could tell where we were going because we were going the way to Sicily in Italy. Get us on the move to Sicily in Italy. It'll take us a little longer. We'll get there after them, but I think we'll find them because they are quite stupid, Gunter assumed. And so they set sail. And so Gunter and his henchmen set sail using Ferdy's boat, and obviously Ferdy and his men were all their hostages on board. Very bad, sadly so. Which Ferdy and his men did not like in the slightest, and they knew what they were doing was badly wrong and illegal. Before long, myself, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen, Susan, and Ian arrived in Sicily. And before long, once we arrived in Sicily, we began looking around at all the wonderful and interesting sights of Sicily. I was like, "Oh my goodness, wonderful Sicily. Sicily sure is beautiful," Penny said. "Oh, beautiful Sicily," Karen said. "I'm just going to go and get some pizzas for us." And then before long, we were like, I sat down on the bench and Penny sat next to me. David, Tommy, Ian and Susan began observing Sicily for themselves. So, and then before long, Karen came back with some pizza. "Would you like some pizza?" "Oh, I'm okay, thank you." Oh, I would love some pizza, thank you, Karen," Penny said, and so Karen passed over the pizza to Penny, and I sat down next to the two ladies. Then Susan walked over to us and said, "Oh, it's getting a little bit hot here. I think I'm going to go and get an ice cream," she said, and so Susan walked away to get an ice cream. As she walked around the alleyway, she picked up her ice cream, and she was just about to walk her way back, but until something struck her as surprising. She saw a seafront and a little boating marina. She walked down to see what it was for herself. Then the side of the boating marina became fairly visible. She walked down, slightly further down, until Susan saw a boat that she recognised. Then she saw something much to her shock. There was Heinz Gunther. He suddenly recognised Susan and said, "Hello," looking towards her. Then, stepping out of nowhere, was Terence with his pretending to be friendly greeting. "Hey." Susan began to run, but as she was about to run away, she was easily captured by the 7'2" henchman, Claude. "Hello!" He said, "Help! Help me! Let me go! Let me go! You get your hands off me!" Susan shrieked and yelled. I suddenly began to wonder where Susan was, so I was walking around Sicily, looking for her until I heard her, "You let me go! Help! Help! Get your hands off me, you ghastly people! You're evil! Let me go!" I saw that Susan was being kidnapped, and she was being chucked into a van, a stolen van. Heinz Gunther and his henchman had stolen. "Hey!" I said, "Hey!" As the van drove, I tried to run after it. Then I ran sideways to try and at least visualise where the van was going to go. Then I saw Karen and Penny. And then I was like, "Penny!" I shouted. "Foxy, what's happened?" Penny asked, in a state of shock. "What did you say?" "Gunther and his henchmen. They've abducted Susan," I said in distress. "Let's rally David, Ian and Tommy." And before long, myself, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen and Ian, we all got in a group as a search party to try and find Susan, who had been kidnapped by Gunther and his henchmen. I think they're heading towards the Isle of Dionysius, but we need to get there before they do. Okay, let's get in. And so we had to, stealing a van as a means to try and save our friend from being badly abducted and to avoid something seriously bad happening to her. We drove the van we'd stolen, although we got permission from one of the Italian residents to use the van and that we'd give it back afterwards. And we used it, and we had to persuade the owner of the van that it was an emergency and that we had to use it, and then which he accepted, and we drove right into action without hesitation to get to the Earl of Dionysius before Heinz Gunther and his henchmen would get there. Before long we got to the Earl of Dionysius at the bottom entrance and not the top entrance. And before long we all walked into the bottom entrance. "This is it. This is the Earl of Dionysius, I believe," I said. It's got quite an interesting look in the inside, mate," David said. "It's very interesting. I mean, I've never been to the Earl of Dionysius before, although I've heard of it," Tommy said. "Oh, interesting," Karen said. "Ba ba ba ba," she said, and then she noticed the echo. "Oh, it's echoes, it's echo, it's echo. Ba 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 ba." Penny said, David said, "Stop, stop, stop." I said, "Goodness, there is an echo, there is an echo, there's an echo." I noticed the echoing sound as we entered the Earl of Dionysius cave. "I think there's a passage, all of you. Let's go. Let's follow Foxy's lead," Ian said, and so myself, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen and Ian all followed my lead as we got deeper and really entered the insides of the Earl of Dionysius cavern. We were walking along many pathways, until then we saw an interesting bridge with a stream underneath it. The bridge looked very old and it was wooden. I may be 5'8" and 11 stone and 154 pounds, and Penny's my height, but she's heavier than I am. So let's hope myself, Penny, or Tommy at 6'3", and I really hope we're not going to break the bridge if we walk over it, I said. So, do you think it will break, Foxy? Tommy asked. Well, I don't know if it will break or not, but there's only one way to find out. David said, Foxy, give the demonstration. You go ahead first and test the bridge. Agreeing to David's suggested recommendation, I began to walk steadily, setting foot on the little bridge underneath the river stream inside the Earl of Dionysius cavern. Fortunately, there were no creaks, but the wood didn't feel entirely strong, but it felt just about strong enough to hold my weight, my 5'8" frame and my weight, and my big size 8 UK or EU 42 feet. I would advise that Tommy goes last or crosses the bridge last, I said as I got halfway to the bridge. And so I began to walk forward, with David following behind me, and then Karen following behind David, and then Penny followed behind Karen, and then it was Ian who followed behind Penny, and then Tommy went after Ian, but Tommy crossed the bridge more slowly, as he didn't want his 6'3" frame and his huge whopping size 15 UK or 16 US or EU 49 feet to accidentally break the supports of the bridge in the Earl of Dionysius. Tommy, you could walk a little bit faster than that. The bridge began to wobble a little, but it didn't creak, luckily. I suppose I could cross it a little more quickly, Tommy said. Even though the bridge began to wobble, it luckily did not creak under his very tall height, heavy weight, and hugely large feet. But Tommy made it to the other side, and he was fortunate. His height and weight, and as well mine and Penny's height and weight, or Karen's height and weight, or David and Ian's height and weight, did not break the bridge of the Earl of Dionysius, and so we carried on further down the passageway of the Earl of Dionysius. But meanwhile, as we were following the Earl of Dionysius, Gunther and his henchmen, or Heinz Gunther and his henchmen, Terence, Claude, Randall and Jonathan, had only just arrived at the Earl of Dionysius at the top entrance. They got out of the stolen van they'd stolen, and as they got out, Gunther was walking on his own, Terence beside him, Randall and Jonathan, but Claude was walking with Susan, restraining her. Let me go, you mean giant, she said to the 7'2" henchman. No, we're closed, said the Italian, who was saying that the Earl of Dionysius was closed for visitors because the last admission time was up. Is this the Earl of Dionysius? Heinz Gunther said, we're closed. But then, out of nowhere, an arrow hit the man in the leg. Ah! Terence had got a bow and arrow out and shot the man because he thought the man was playing a naughty joke, when in fact the man was not telling naughty joke. He was telling Gunther and his henchmen that the Earl of Dionysius was closed to visitors. But then, holding the man at gunpoint, Heinz Gunther said, do we have access to enter the Earl of Dionysius? Realizing now that his life was at threat and in danger, the man decided to let Heinz Gunther and his henchmen in as a means to save his own life. And so one of the man's colleagues opened the door to the Earl of Dionysius and reluctantly allowed Gunther and his henchmen to enter. And so Gunther went in first, followed by Terence, Randall and Jonathan, and walking behind them was Claude, was Claude and Susan, with Claude obviously restraining Susan as the 7'2" muscular henchman dragged the short 5'2" Susan into the Earl of Dionysius cavern. Gunther and his henchmen had just about reached various points of the Earl of Dionysius and were looking for clues to see if we had entered the Earl of Dionysius. As they got deeper and deeper and really got in to the main depths and the main parts of the Earl of Dionysius cavern, they were looking around themselves to see what there was inside, until Here, Gunther, here, Gunther, here, Gunther, Terence shouted. He realised that I was inside the Earl of Dionysius, alongside David, Penny, Karen, Ian and Tommy. Foxy, Gunther said thoughtfully. He's got to be inside. He is. I can tell he's been inside with his friends. Foxy, Susan said. Ow! Susan got hit by Claude for realising I was in. You mean giant. You have the right to remain silent, Claude rudely said to Susan as he restrained the little lady. Before long, Terence leading Gunther and his henchmen the way we had gone, they walked their way to at least try and find some clues as to where myself, David, Tommy, Penny and Ian had been. Whereas meanwhile, inside the Earl of Dionysius, I was leading the way with me, David, Penny, Karen, Ian and Tommy. We were all inside the Earl of Dionysius, and I was leading the way. But we didn't know we were several steps ahead of Gunther and his henchmen. We already thought he'd entered the Earl of Dionysius cavern by now. But we decided to follow the pathway all the same. It's possible we'll find them if we just keep going forward. Well, listening to Foxy, Tommy said. I too am following his lead, Ian said. We follow your lead, Foxy. I mean, Susan will turn up, but it's Gunther and his henchmen. They're going to be facing hefty consequences. Too right, David, said Penny and Karen, as everybody followed my lead in the Earl of Dionysius cavern. We kept walking through and just kept following whatever path we could follow, as we were on a mission to try and find and save our friend Susan from terrible, terrible troubles. Meanwhile, as we kept going along, Gunther and his henchmen followed several clues, trying to figure out where myself, David, Penny, Karen, Ian and Tommy had been. As they were looking for clues in the Earl of Dionysius cavern, Susan all of a sudden broke herself free from Claude and began to run away. But Claude quickly reacted to Susan's escape. Hey, get back here, Terence! Claude shouted as he began to give chase after Susan as she ran away. Susan was running in the cavern. But Claude was beginning to catch up. As she began to run down another passageway of the Earl of Dionysius cavern, she was suddenly stopped by Terence and stopped by Terence, being held at gunpoint by the henchman. Once she was held at gunpoint, she immediately stopped running. To try it as a means for Claude to no longer lose track of Susan, a handcuff was placed on Susan's left wrist to Claude's right wrist, And as the handcuff was placed on Susan and Claude to stop Susan from escaping from Claude, stop escaping from the 7'2" Claude, she ended up saying, "You don't need to do that," she said. But Gunther's henchman took no notice of her, and as Gunther's henchman walked forward, Claude followed them from behind, dragging Susan along with him. They reached the little bridge underneath the stream, where myself, David, Penny, Karen, Ian and Tommy had crossed earlier on. Jonathan, being the shortest out of all of Heinz Gunther's henchmen, at a mere 5'10", went first, and then Randall came in after, being 6 foot, and with Heinz Gunther standing at the same 6 foot height as Randall, he crossed over, and then Terence went over, being taller at 6'1½", and Claude, being 7'2", being the tallest out of everybody, was the last one to cross over. But with him, he was obviously restraining the 5'2" Susan Reich. Claude came under the impression he had to be careful to cross over the bridge, and so he began to cross over the wooden bridge across the stream. As he began to cross, it immediately began to creak. Then before long, creak, 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 the wooden slabs of the bridge began to crackle and collapse slightly, and as his huge size 19 UK or 20 US or EU 53 feet set foot on the bridge, every step Claude made, it was creak, 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 creak. The wooden supports were beginning to steadily collapse and creak and groan under his very, very tall 7'2" height and his very, very heavy, roughly 165 kg weight, namely out of excessive muscle mass. As Claude began to slowly cross the bridge, it creaked and groaned more than anything under his weight. But as he was very slowly beginning to cross the bridge, Susan got into Claude's pocket to find the handcuff keys. But then there was trouble. Claude noticed Susan going into his pocket until, "Hey!" he said. He finally caught Susan with the handcuff key. Susan, in her defensive way possible, put the handcuff key in her mouth so that Claude would not get a hold of it. Give me that. Both the two people, Susan and Claude, fought, but the bridge groaned, and then suddenly it groaned and creaked until, with a final jolt, the bridge broke. "No!" Claude shouted. The bridge broke, sending Claude and Susan tumbling off the wooden bridge and splash into the river. The mighty splash startled Gunther and his henchmen, and then Gunther, looking to see what the noise was, saw that Claude and Susan had fallen into the river. The bridge could not take Claude's very, very tall height and his very, very heavy weight. It had collapsed under his weight. Wanting to waste no time other than trying to find myself, David Scott, Tommy Gardiner, Penny, Karen and Ian, he said to his men, "Leave them." But Terence, worried about Claude, as well as Jonathan and Randall feeling worried about Claude, they didn't immediately adhere to Gunther's request. "I said leave them," Gunther said, and after Gunther said leave them for a second time, Terence and all of Gunther's henchmen followed Gunther, whereas meanwhile in the river, along the rushing stream waves, underwater, Susan and Claude were fighting each other. Claude was trying to get the handcuff key from Susan, until they came to a little grater. Claude's torch hit the little grater, and with Susan being small enough to get through the hole of the grate inside the river of the Earl of Dionysius, she got the handcuff key out of her mouth and unlocked the handcuff from her wrist and cuffed Claude to the process of the grate. Claude was stuck, but he knew he'd be able to get out. He knew he would be able to break himself out of this. But knowing he had lost Susan and Susan had escaped his grasp, so in a way he was partially outwitted and outsmarted by the little 5'2" Susan, he was enraged and left with no choice but to yell in an enraged fit. And Susan was out of sight. Susan got up from the water, peeping up, gasping for breath as she got up from the top shore of the water and began swimming, but not underwater, trying to find a way to escape the Earl of Dionysius cavern. Meanwhile, myself, David, Penny, Karen, Ian and Tommy, we were following many more pathways in the Earl of Dionysius. And then, as we followed more pathways, we came to a little stream. We were walking along with the wall beside, path a long way, and then there was the water stream beside us. Don't think Where are we going? Tommy asked. I was about to ask the same, Ian asked. Not sure, but we are still inside the Earl of Dionysius cavern. Then we heard some splashing sounds. Did you hear that? I asked. I think I did, Foxy, Penny said. We all, myself, Penny, Karen, David, Ian and Tommy, looked to see where the splashing noises came from. And then we heard a, "Hello? Anyone here?" We knew who that voice was. It was Susan Reich's voice. "Susan!" I asked. "Hello, Foxy?" Susan asked. "Yes, Susan, it's us. We'll wait for you. So glad you're here." And there we saw the little Susan swimming in the lake. And she swam closer and closer. "Here, don't worry, Susan, I'll help you out of the water," Tommy said. And as Susan got to the side of the path, Tommy extended his hand, and then Susan extended her hand, and then Tommy pulled little Susan out of the water. Susan was soaking wet from head to foot. "Oh, Susan, we were so worried about you," I said. "Oh, Susan," Penny said, and Penny just quickly embraced the little 5'2" Susan under her 5'8" frame, tightly embracing her, as she'd been so worried about poor Susan. "Oh, Susan, we were so worried about you," she said as she tightly embraced Susan Reich herself. "So glad you're okay." And then she gave her a kiss on the head. "Are you okay? Please, Susan, you're right." "Of course I'm okay, Penny," Susan said. "What's all the fuss about? I've just outwitted a 7-foot+ giant. Now all we have to do is find a way to escape here." "Do you mean Gunther and his henchmen are already in the Earl of Dionysius cavern right now?" Sadly so, Foxy," Susan said. "I knew they'd got in here," and I said, "Let's look for an escape. Follow me, everybody." And so, with me leading the way, David, Penny, Karen, Ian, Susan and Tommy all followed my lead as a means to try and find a way out of the Earl of Dionysius cavern. We kept walking and walking through many pathways, through many little caves, and then we saw a great big zone. It looked like a dead-end zone. Oh, I wonder how we're going to get out, I thought. But this is interesting. I think we're almost in Earl of Dionysia's paradise, Foxy, Ian and Tommy said. I don't know what this is, but we need to find a way out eventually. Yes. But is there going to be a way out? Penny asked. Of course there's a way out, said a voice. It was Heinz Gunther. He and his henchmen arrived at the place where we'd arrived. Gunther, I knew you were in here, I said. Of course we're in here, Foxy. It's time, unfortunately you're going to have to come with us. But we can stand here negotiating if you want to. I'm open for all negotiations. It's your choice. You can negotiate, or go now, or worse, you will die. It's your choice, Sir Foxy, Heinz Gunther said. Realizing I was in danger, I decided to negotiate with Heinz Gunther himself. Let's begin the discussions, Mr. Gunther, I said. Thank you, Gunther said kindly, and so all of Gunther's henchmen, being that of Terence, Randall and Jonathan, stood guard beside David, Penny, Karen, Ian, Tommy and Susan. But Susan, realizing that there weren't enough henchmen to guard all of us, and it was only myself and Gunther having discussions, she decided to sneak away. She decided to sneak up and play a little trick on Gunther's henchmen. Myself and Gunther began negotiating, and I was telling him that what he did to Trevor was wrong and very bad, which he did not seem to accept, and then began explaining his terms and conditions of certain stuff and all that. Susan walked up to the top of the cabin. Myself and Gunther continued our discussions. And we were like, blah, 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 oh yes, well, there's a point, but, I mean, it's not good, this is really bad, but could we do something, that sort of thing, but realizing my life was in danger, if I didn't accept certain things, I would probably be killed. But, before long, as the discussions myself and Heinz Gunther continued to have, Susan, jumping out from the top of the wall, jumped on Terence, knocking him over. And then I got up and punched Gunther right in the face. Stop him! And then a fight ensued. Stand back! Myself, David, Penny and Tommy, we'll deal with them. A fight ensued, and then I picked up a gun and began shooting. In self-defense. I wasn't going to shoot the people, but I was shooting in self-defense. But Karen, Penny, I think it's best for you to stand back and not get involved in the fight, I said. And so Penny, David, Ian and Karen stood beside, but Ian decided to get involved. But David did not dare get involved, with myself and Tommy fighting off Gunther's henchmen. There was a gunfight ensuing, and as well, but not assault. But the moment I got up, Terence, taking aim, pulled the trigger, the gun fired, and I was hit. I had been shot in the chest. Foxy! Karen said. But then Jonathan rushed over to Karen after hearing her shrieking for me, and just grabbed hold of her. You let me go! You let me go! And obviously Terence grabbing hold and trying to restrain Susan. Oh, you let me go! Ouch, no! You let me go! You let me go! Get your hands off me! Karen shouted at Jonathan angrily. What next? But then Randall, who came over to Gunter, said, what next now, boss? Now that Foxy's shot, we grab him. Heinz Gunter said. And then, before long, the 5'10" Randall and 6' Heinz Gunter grabbed hold of me and began to drag me away until a voice saying, hold it right there. There was a government agent, a British government agent, holding his ID and a torch, and in a suit, tie, said, Heinz Gunter, you're under arrest. And there, standing beside the man in the suit, was Agent Rachel Botha. We found somebody by the collapsed wooden bridge of the stream. Is he yours? Who is this guy? And there, with 2 agents, came Claude, handcuffed. All handcuffed was the 7'2" Claude, with 2 agents walking beside him, completely handcuffed, soaking wet from head to foot, and looking very, very cross and angry in the face. He is with us, that's Claude. Well, all of you are under arrest for conspiracy to murder and also aggravated assault, and as well you're under arrest for wounding with intent and illegally having possession of weapons without a firearms license. And the man said, right, take them away, agents. And so the agent began to handcuff Heinz Gunter, Terence, Randall and Jonathan, and as they were being dragged away, Gunter was like, I'll get you next time, Foxy! I'll get you! And they were shouting and enraged with anger as they were all dragged away, as Heinz Gunter and his henchmen were dragged away from the Earl of Dionysius cavern. But Agent Rachel Botha was the last to leave because she saw I was in trouble. Karen rushing over towards me, but Agent Rachel Botha had to stop her. Please, I need to deal. Sorry, we got to deal with this. But Karen was desperately upset, trying to plead with Rachel. She ended up saying, we can't just leave him like this. He's bleeding. He's shot. Please, just let me see him. Reluctantly agreeing to Karen's plea, Karen rushed over to me, and then Penny rushed over to me. Oh, Foxy, please, can you hear me? Oh, and I was feeling delirious as I'd been shot. Oh, Foxy, please, Foxy, help us out. Karen said, please get up. We've got to get you to the hospital. Oh, Foxy, please, no, don't give up. We've got an upcoming rally next month, an autumn rally, and your friend Tony from America. Just think of how upset you'll be if you died from gunshot wounds. Please, come on, do this for us, Foxy, Tommy said. Please, help us out. You're going to be fine, Foxy. Penny sobbed. Both Penny and Karen were in absolute tears, horrified as to what happened to me. Come on, Foxy. We'll get you to a hospital in Sicily. You're cleared of the accusations. No further action will be taken against you. No action, I said, very deliriously. Yeah, you're innocent, Foxy. The government agent has spoken so, David said. You're a free man now, Foxy, Ian said. Once you're treated for your gunshot wounds, you'll be back home in England. And so Tommy had to help me, and also Penny and Karen were helping me because I was struggling to walk after being shot in the chest. But walking was very difficult. And even Susan and David, who were walking but side by side each other, were very worried for me. But extremely devastated. But Susan Penny and Karen were extremely devastated and horrified as to what had happened to me. As we got outside the Earl of Dionysius cavern, I was by this point really struggling to walk. But luckily there was an ambulance outside, and fortunately the ambulance, because the staff had called the paramedics to take the publicist to hospital who got shot with the bow and arrow. Speaking in Italian, the paramedic said to the paramedics in Italian to include me because they could see I was in trouble. The Italian paramedics listened to the request, and I was taken into the ambulance to be taken to a hospital in Sicily. And as the ambulance, left the Earl of Dionysius cavern, Penny and Karen, devastated to the bare bone, sobbed, did nothing but sobbed, and both tightly embraced each other, sobbing, feeling horrified and extremely upset and worried for me, and worried and horrified over what had happened to me. And Susan, very devastated as to what had happened to me, began tightly embracing David. David, who did not cry but was very upset and devastated for me, he didn't sob in the way Susan sobbed, but he knew to hug her in comfort. A little tear rolled from David's eye, and Tommy, seeing Penny and Karen's devastation, began to comfort Penny and Karen with his very tall 6'3" frame. And Ian stood beside David as David was tightly embracing the little Susan. Over a week had passed. I was back home in Brighton in East Sussex in England after being treated for the gunshot wounds in Italy. I was back home, and I was airlifted back home via helicopter. I was fast asleep one morning until my alarm went off. Once my alarm went off, I got up. I had a shower, but I had to be careful because I had a bandage wrapped around me following being treated for the gunshot wounds. And I had some breakfast, fed the cats, and once the cats were fed, obviously I was dressed, and I was to meet David, Penny, Karen, Ian, Tommy and Susan at the Hove Library. And so after I had my breakfast, I walked my way down to the Hove Library. I walked into the Hove Library, and there, at the Hove Library, Tommy was already waiting to greet me. "Good morning, Foxy," Tommy said. "Good morning. Where is everybody?" "I'll show you, Foxy. Come with me a moment." And so I followed Tommy as to know where I was meant to be. And there, Tommy led me to David, Ian, Penny, Karen and Susan. Penny and Karen and Susan were so overjoyed and over the moon to see that I was okay. It was first Karen who flew up and gave a big hug, putting her arms around me. And she was also in tears at the same time, saying, "Foxy, I'm just so happy you're safe and well. And then Penny came over and tightly embraced me and was like, Foxy, you survived. I'm so glad you were successfully treated for the gunshot wounds. And then Susan came over and tightly embraced me and was like, and said, Foxy, I cannot tell you just how happy I am to see you. We were so worried and upset for you, and we were horrified as to what happened to you. Hope you're okay, my good friend. And David and Ian ended up saying, we're so glad, I'm just so pleased you got treated for your gunshot wounds, Foxy, mate. I mean, you could have died easily. The important thing is you survived. Thanks, David. I feel thankful and grateful to have survived, and I'm now grateful for every day I have, and I'm seriously not taking my future for granted, I said in response. But just to say, Foxy, we've got another surprise for you. And I was confused then, and I said, what is it? And then, before long, walking into the library room we were sitting in, came Graham and Fiona Hesketh. I looked in surprise as I recognised the two faces and the bodily figures. And then I was like, Graham, Fiona, hey, Foxy, how you doing, man? Graham said, oh, Foxy, it's good to see you, Fiona said. They both came over and gave me a nice hug. And they're like, I hope you're okay after your gunshot wounds. Oh my goodness, that must have been frightening for you. Oh, Fiona, Graham, it was ghastly. Being shot is the most painful experience you could ever face. I said, well, thank goodness, Foxy, that your assailant who shot you in the chest got arrested, and he'll be jailed. He'll be jailed without a doubt what he just did to you. I believe he will. What he did, he shouldn't get away with it. What he did was wounding with intent. Yes, too right, Fiona said, but the main thing is you survived and we're here. And we came to see if you were okay. Susan got in touch with us and we came over to see if you were okay. Thank you, Graham and Fiona. I always appreciate both of you, and thank you always for taking me under your wing, both of you. And Foxy, we've got another surprise for you, Graham said. You've got someone's gonna come to see you. And then I was like, who's that? And before long, a lady walked into the room. I didn't know who the lady was, but Graham and Fiona did. The lady was none other than Michelle Pope. Meet Michelle, Foxy, your good friend. I stood up and I was like, Michelle, is this Michelle Pope? Hi, Michelle said. Hello, Foxy. I came to see if you're okay. I'm wishing you well. And Michelle walked over, but she was worried for me at the same time. Oh, Foxy. Oh, my dear Foxy. Poor you that you got shot. As she walked over and began tightly embracing me with a big hug. Oh, it's not fun being in the hospital treated for anything, is it? I'm so glad you got successfully treated, and that you're well," she said as the lovely Michelle began she was tightly embracing me with a big nice long hug while she was talking about it. And a little tear rolled from Michelle's eye as she was tightly embracing me, as she felt dreadfully sorry for me regarding my ordeal I faced. "Thank you, Michelle," I said. "You know I always appreciate you for being a wonderful friend, and I always appreciate your compliments towards me when you said I represented the epitome of a gentleman." Michelle smiled. Another tear rolled down her eyes, but she smiled at the same time, and didn't say anything other than she continued to tightly embrace me with a big long hug. And then, after a roughly 2-3 minute long hug, she gave me a nice kiss, and then very slowly but gently let me go. The main thing is that you, Foxy, are safe. And I'd only just came to see if you were all right. I will have to go in a minute, Foxy, but it's so nice to see you, that you're better, but I'm just so sorry for your injury," she said, and gave me another hug. And then quickly let me go, and then respectfully walked and left the library, giving me a nice wave and blew a kiss to me as she left the Hove Library. But obviously before Michelle left, and before she left and blew the kiss for everyone, she ended up giving everybody else a nice tight long hug of embrace, and then obviously subsequently left and blew the kiss. And left the library to get to wherever she needed to go to. "We'd been in touch with Michelle, Foxy," Graham said, "and she was more than happy to come over and see you. I'm extremely thankful to the wonderful Michelle. I'm more thankful to her than I've ever been," I said to Graham. "She's wonderful, isn't she? And we're very lucky to have her in our life, aren't we?" "I couldn't agree with you more, Graham," he said. "And honestly, well done for being so lovely and accepting of Michelle, especially when she was hoping for the best for you," Fiona said. "There's another surprise for you," Fiona said. "What's that?" And then 2 people came walking into the room where all of us, being myself, David, Tommy, Penny, Karen, Ian, Susan, Graham and Fiona. The next people who came walking into the room was Trevor Cole, MC, and his partner Gwen. "Foxy, hello!" "Ah, Trevor, hello there. It's so wonderful to see you," I said. "Oh, Foxy, I really hope you're okay following your gunshot wounds. I mean, thank goodness you survived it, you know. You could have died. I mean, that troll's henchman, what he did to you was unacceptable and an extremely blatant crime, you know. Thank goodness he got arrested and is being brought to justice for what he did to you." "I'm feeling the same, Trevor," I said in response to him. I'm all right, but I'm steadily recovering from my gunshot wounds, but I can fortunately do more things at least, but I can't take the bandage off as of yet." And then I showed the bandage. When I unbuttoned my shirt collar, I showed the bandage that was wrapped around me. And Trevor was like, "Oh gosh, it looks bad. Does it hurt?" Oh, Trevor, the pain was ghastly. The pain still is quite ghastly, but it's at least a little bit more tolerable now, but before I was in so much pain after I was shot in the chest, I said. Foxy, Gwen and we've got a surprise for you. Do you? I asked. We definitely do, Foxy, Gwen said. It will await for you soon. We've got someone to see you. And then Trevor nodded in response to what Gwen said. Who's that? Oh, it's time for fitness, and we've got to see someone. The singing voice got louder and clearer, and there, walking into the room in the library where we were all sitting in, was Hutchie and Mel. It was both Hutchie and Mel, and then following behind them was Annabelle and Grigopedia, and of course none other than that of Ferdy. Hutchie, Mel, Grigopedia, Annabelle, Ferdy, I said. What a wonderful surprise to see you all. Oh, Foxy, it is so wonderful to see you, Annabelle said as she walked over and gave me a nice big hug. Oh, Foxy, I was so worried about you when hearing about your gunshot wounds. I thought, Grigopedia and I thought we might come over and wish you well and say hello and hope that you make a full recovery following the injuries you've sustained whilst we're on our way to Scotland. I do hope your Scotland holiday goes very well for you, Annabelle and Grigopedia. Rest well, do take care and take things easy, buddy, Grigopedia said towards me as a means of giving some useful advice. Your gunshot wounds were serious, and you could have easily not survived it. But do what you're doing now, take things easy, and your recovery will come to you. Grigopedia is right. Listen to Grigopedia because he's good with advice, Annabelle said. And so Annabelle gave me another hug, and then Grigopedia gave me a hug and a handshake, and both Annabelle and Grigopedia respectfully left. And then it was time for Hutchie and Mel to greet me. Hey, Foxy, how are you doing, man? I mean, my goodness, Foxy, whatever happened to you? I mean, you had gunshot wounds. I mean, Foxy, how could you survive the gunshot wounds? I mean, you could have easily died where you were shot. I didn't think I was going to survive it, Hutchie and Mel. Honestly, the pain was so ghastly. I thought I was going to die after being shot. I really did. I'm not surprised, mate, Hutchie said. But at least you're getting better now. And you're taking things easy, aren't you? Oh, yes. I'm very, very much taking things easy, Hutchie. Vitally so. Well, it's good you're taking things easy, Foxy, Mel said. I mean, to have been shot in the chest, you could have easily died. Oh, Foxy, David said as he got up and walked towards me. There's another surprise for you. What's the other surprise? Well, you'll be about to find out for yourself, Ferdy said. Thank goodness you're better now, Ferdy. How did you get better? I had two artificial knees replaced after being shot in the old kneecaps. I'm doing fine. I'm really doing okay. You know, it was a bit of an extensive surgery, but they did a good job. And so, but you got another surprise, David tells you, Ferdy said to me. You should accept the surprise, Trevor said. I'm awaiting to see what it is, I said in response. And the surprise, walking into the room where we were sitting in the library, was none other than that of Dave Bryan. Dave. Hello there. Oh, Foxy, hello. Oh, blimey, mate, you gone through quite the ordeal, man. You got shot in the chest, and you've survived those gunshot wounds. I did get shot, but the gunshot wounds was very, very painful. The pain was extraordinary, Dave. Fortunately, I got successfully treated and fixed up for it. I'm not fully recovered yet, but I'm in the recovery stage, and fortunately I can do much more now than I could before. I can see you're recovering at least, but I'm just so sorry this all happened to you, man. Then I showed Dave the bandage I had. Oh, blimey me, Foxy. That really looks bad. Does it hurt? It really was extraordinary. It still does hurt, but the pain is tolerable now. Oh, that's lucky, mate. Thank goodness for that. And then Hutchie, standing up, said, why don't we all get some ice cream, everybody? That's an excellent idea, Hutchie and Mel. Graham said, come on, Foxy and everybody, let's go and get some ice creams down at the Morocco's Ice Cream, he said. Oh, yes, let's go, I said. Well, one can never have too much or be too old for ice cream, can they? Tommy said. And we all got up, being that of myself, David, Penny, Karen, Ian, Tommy, Susan, Graham, Fiona, Trevor, Gwen, Hutchie, Mel, Dave, and Ferdy. All 15 of us left the Hove Library and walked our way to Morocco's in Hove. Hutchie wanted to run, and Hutchie gave a little run, but Dave tried to catch up with him. Hutchie, Mel, slow down. We're all walking here. Some people have had injuries and had to be treated at the hospital. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot. I'm just excited for ice cream, Dave, mate, Hutchie said. And so we all walked our way down to the seafront, and before long we reached the Morocco's in Hove. As we all reached Morocco's in Hove, we all paid individually for whatever ice creams we had. Myself and Graham, alongside Ferdy and David, we sat on the bench together with our ice cream, and David was to take our photograph of us having an ice cream with our ice creams on the bench. We took it on my camera, and Fiona took a picture of myself, Graham, Ferdy, and all that. We took our picture as we were sitting on the bench with our ice creams. All of us enjoyed our ice cream. Myself, David, Penny, Karen, Ian, Tommy, Susan, Graham, Fiona, Hutchie, Mel, Trevor, Gwen, Ferdy and Dave, all 15 of us, were thoroughly enjoying our ice creams, and as well as enjoying some photo shoots together of some of us, and as well as exploring certain parts of Hove seafront, and as well as some parts of the Hove estate nearing the Hove seafront. But before long it was time for Hutchie and Mel to go back home to Lincolnshire. Goodbye, Foxy. I do hope your recovery from your injuries goes swift and well for you. I'll be thinking of you, mate, Hutchie said, and both Hutchie and Mel respectfully walked their way to Hove railway station so that they could catch their train to get back home. Whereas myself, David, Penny, Karen, Ian, Tommy, Susan, Graham, Fiona, Trevor, Gwen, Ferdy and Dave, we all walked our way to the pub. But Dave wasn't going to go to the pub because he had to drive back to Kent. And Ferdy wasn't going to be joining us for a drink because he was going to be getting the bus somewhere to meet a friend, and he was going to go out for a meal with one of his friends. And also David and Tommy and Ian, they could not join us either at the Connaught pub for a few drinks. But never mind. Well, Foxy, hope your recovery goes well, man. I'll see you at Eastbourne Magnificent Motors, will you? And we both shook hands. I said, yes, I'll see you at Magnificent Motors, Dave. Do take care and have a safe trip back to Kent. Will do, Brill. See you at Eastbourne Magnificent Motors, man, Dave said, and Dave respectfully got into his car, started the engine and drove his way to Kent. And obviously, because Dave, Tommy and Ian, obviously they thought about drink driving, they were like, yeah, I've got to go now, Foxy, mate. You do take care, won't you? Yeah. And if I don't see you at East Grinstead Bus Rally, I'll see you at Magnificent Motors then. Oh, yes, of course, David. I'll see you at the Eastbourne Magnificent Motors. Do take care, won't you? Yeah, I'll see you at Magnificent Motors, mate. Bye-bye. And so David walked his way to the bus stop, and Tommy was like, hope you recover from your injuries well, Foxy, Tommy said, and we shook hands. And he shook hands with everybody else, including Graham and Fiona and Trevor and Gwen. And then he respectfully walked over to his car. And Ian respectfully said goodbye to myself and everybody else, including Graham, Fiona, Trevor and Gwen. And then he had to walk respectfully to his car too, so he could drive back home. And now it was only just and then Ferdy had to exchange his goodbyes and then walked his way to the bus stop. So now it was only left with myself, Penny, Karen, Susan, Graham, Fiona, Trevor and Gwen. Just the 8 of us, and then we entered the Connaught pub. And fortunately there was a table for the 8 of us. Graham, Fiona, Trevor and Gwen sat next to each other on one side, and on the opposite side there was myself, Penny, Karen and Susan. All of us had a marvellous time at the Connaught pub. We had a few drinks. I had a gin and tonic. Graham had a beer, as did Fiona. Susan only had her wine, being the wine aficionado she is known to be, but that's okay all the same. Penny had a few alcohol drinks as well, as did Karen as well. All of us had a ball and enjoyed a great few drinks together, and Trevor had a few beers and Gwen had a nice drink as well. Before long, after a nice few drinks and some nice pub meals at the Connaught pub, dinner meals that was, it was time for all of us to go home. I exchanged my goodbyes to Graham, Fiona, Trevor, Gwen, Penny, Susan and Karen, and thanked them all enormously, stating that I was enormously thankful and grateful for the evening out we had at the Connaught pub, and that we could and I let all of them know, being that of Graham, Fiona, Trevor, Gwen, Penny, Karen and Susan, letting them know that they are always welcome in the future to have another pub night out, evening out with me. And so we all exchanged our goodbyes, and we went, and Graham and Fiona went to their hotel, to where they were staying in, and also Susan went to the hotel she was staying in over in England, having decided to change the rest of her holiday to be England after where she was initially going to go to England after spending a holiday in Austria, but decided to spend the remaining amount of time she was meant to do in Austria over in England instead. And Penny went back to the hotel she was staying in for the remainder of her holiday. She was over in England from Wisconsin in America, and Karen went back to her hotel, having already headed over to England on holiday from Pensacola in Florida. And then I walked back home, and then I got undressed into my pyjamas and went happily to sleep, dreaming of all the wonderful memories I had with my friends Graham, Fiona, Trevor, Gwen, Penny, Karen, Susan, David, Tommy, Ian, and of course Dave, Ferdy, Hutchie Mel, and of course encountering none other than that of Michelle Pope. And as well also encountering briefly Annabelle and Gregopedia. Those were going to be wonderful memories which were going to sustain me well in my road to recovery following the bad gunshot wounds I had from the Earl of Dionysius. The end. Well, everybody, that was the fun, inspirational story I had to share. That was the big, long, inspirational chats episode. I said it was going to be either episode 105 or anywhere between episode 105 to 110. And this is, well, it's done on episode 105. Just to say, the fun, inspirational adventure episode. And I'm certainly happy I've done it now in 2024. And I'm certainly looking forward to hearing your very feedback on this very episode. But my apologies if it was far too long for some of your liking and all the rest of things. But thanks everybody indeed for watching. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Thanks everybody indeed for watching, and I shall certainly see you in the very next episode. But this was based on a dream I had, and I thought it would be well worth sharing it as an inspirational chats episode. Ta-ta, another time. From Foxy.